Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our Talk and Teach sessions, the very first day of CXC number 10. We have up next, as you can see, David Rickert. David grew up in Columbus, Ohio, surrounded by stacks of Mad magazines, Calvin and Hobbes collections, and Walt Disney comics. He spent most of his free time learning about sable hair brushes, non-repo blue pencils, and Bristol board so he could pursue a career drawing a comic strip. He went to Ohio State University instead to pursue a degree in education, but never gave up on the dream. He drew a daily strip in the Lantern, which is OSU's school newspaper, for most of his college years. After earning a teaching degree and working a few years in the classroom, the itch to create comics resurfaced. His first graphic novel, Pizza, Pickles, and Apple Pie, which was described as a breezy, brief, illustrated history of many of today's popular foods, came out last year. His second graphic novel, Checkups, Shots, and Robots, which comes out in November, is described as a, quote, high-energy, occasionally irreverent, comic-style work. So here you go. I will turn you over to David.
Okay, I thought we'd start off today with a few hand exercises. So if you have one or two hands free, you'll be set. So we're going to start off making palms out like this. Okay. Everybody make fists like this. Let's do the okay sign with one or both hands. Let's do the peace sign. Let's do the Vulcan sign. Let's see if anybody can do this. I think this is one of those things that not everybody can do. But anyway, yeah, I shouldn't have been surprised that people knew that was the sign. I should have just, yeah. So, and then let's make a heart. Okay, let's point. We don't want to point at people. That's rude. Let's do, pretend you're drinking like a cup of British tea. Make sure your pinky's out like that. Okay, and then everybody wave like this. And then my parents are right there, so wave to them so you can say hi to them. They actually wanted to come see Jeff Smith, but they got the time wrong. So they're actually, yeah, they're an hour early. So anyway, so here they are. So anyway, this is all just to kind of show you that hands are really complicated. They can do lots of things, and they're very, very hard to draw and require a lot of practice. And so, it's interesting because we see them all the time. They're always in our line of vision. You think that we'd be better at drawing them because we just see them. But they're extraordinarily complicated. They can do a lot. And this presentation is going to get into some basics of that. So we're going to learn the basics of hand anatomy because you need to know how hands work in order to draw them effectively. We're going to look at some hand inspirations of me, some people that I really enjoy looking at their hands to see how they draw them and how they use them. We're going to talk about ways to simplify hands so that they can become easier to draw. And we're going to discuss how hands can add to gestures so that we can make our comics more expressive. And we're also going to look at some hand poses that you'll use a lot. So that way you don't have to draw all these hands, but if you're working on drawing hands, you can just master a few basic shapes and you can do a lot with those. Okay, so before we get into hand anatomy, I do just want to say just a little bit about my work and what I do. You can tell from the books up here, I do most of my work for like children, either children, middle grade. I do some stuff for the high school and things like that. And they tend to be very funny, just kind of funny ways to present ideas, funny ways to present history and things like that. So that's where I'm coming from. Didn't really come from like a superhero background. That was never really what I was interested in drawing. So just so that you know a little bit about where I'm coming from and the kinds of hands that you'll see. So we'll get to, let's start off with hand anatomy and some things that I think are really important when you draw hands. And one of the things that I was told at some point, I'm not really quite sure if it's true, but it's in order to be a good cartoonist and draw cartoony people, you need to be able to understand the anatomy so that you know what you're doing and you got the basics and the fundamentals. So here we go. This is not a famous hand model. This is my hand. And the big thing is, and I forgot to mention, you can take photographs of any of this, that's fine. Or you're going to see a thing for my Substack, which is all this stuff is on my Substack right now, and you can subscribe to that and see that. But yeah, the palm is basically a square. I say basically because it's not exactly a square, but for the purposes of drawing it, it's a square. And then when we'll get to the thumbs, the thumb and the fingers, you'll notice that the fingers have that curve to them, and that the ring and the index finger are not quite the same length, but for the purposes of cartooning or drawing just about anything, you can pretty much treat those two as about the same length. And then you'll notice that the thumb is roughly the same length as those two fingers, the ring and the index finger, okay? This is just a general statement. I'm sure that there's a lot of variations in hands and finger lengths and things like that. The length of your fingers as a group is slightly shorter than your palm, and your thumb is slightly shorter than the width of your palm. Okay, so then the next one is, if you curl your fingers, they will come to the middle of your palm. I was seeing people if this is not true for any of you, you can feel free to tell me, yeah, this does not apply to me. So, all right. And then your thumb doesn't move directly across the palm, it moves diagonally. And this is important for when you're placing your thumb properly in drawings when you do fists or anything where the thumb goes across, okay? So those are the basics of that. And then two other things that I will use a lot in my work is noticing that there's two fleshy parts of your palm right next to your thumb and right on the side. And then there's also a line that goes across. And you'll see that I'll add those a lot in my drawings too. Okay, so those are the basic things that you'll need to know. And one of the best things that you can do just to kind of understand how hands work is to draw your own hand realistically, but don't spend too much time on it. Just a few 5-minute sketches will do for that. The trick is to just get used to how your hands move when they're in a variety of poses. You won't be drawing every wrinkle, of course, but good drawing is more about learning how to see rather than how to draw well. And I'm pretty sure in art school, like in high school, I had to draw my hand like really, really detailed. Did anybody have to, is that still common practice? I don't know if anybody, okay, so yeah, and I think one of the other problems with drawing hands too is that you always see them in like a first person perspective, which is not how you draw them in comics. Like that's not, you're always drawing third person or whatever. So, okay, so here's some hand-spirations from just people's hands that I really have enjoyed. Okay, so this is Wally Wood from Super Duper Man, which is probably the single most important comic that I have read in my life. And Son of Mad, that book was the reason probably why I'm doing all these things, okay? And he was a guy that just really knew how to use hands, no matter what they were doing. You can see, this guy just knew how to draw like humorous stuff. He's pulling up his belt like super far. He's pointing at, I think it's Captain Marbles. And he's, punching the wall and just a lot of cool stuff. He just knew how to do stuff that looked realistic, but then turned it into cartoony drawings. And like much of everything in Mad, what I loved about it was that you had adults that were basically acting like children. And when I was like an 8 or 9 or whatever, I thought that was like the greatest thing in the world. Another Mad guy is Jack Davis, and you'll look at these hands, and I think he gets a lot of credit for like his feet, but his hands are great too. And if you look at these, like these fingers do not look like fingers at all. Like especially this boy, like it's just crazy, but they just seem to work. And again, very, very expressive as well. So a lot to admire about Jack Davis. But the guy that really inspired me to draw hands well was Uderzo, who draws the Asterix comics. And the funny story about this one is that I discovered him when I was over at my friend's house, and I think he had just gotten back from France. And he had a copy of Asterix and the Normans, and it was in French. Like, I did not understand a word of this book, but I borrowed it and just was entranced by the drawings and just how expressive they were and how cool they were. Some of it was really detailed, some of it wasn't. But I borrowed this book and I had it, and it wasn't until probably like a year later that I got the English translation of this book, and then I ended up getting like about 12 of them, I think. And he was a guy that just had a unique style to him. And this is a good example of this. And what you'll see is that his faces are really cartoony, but his hands aren't. And that was what just completely drew me to his style. I mean, you can see the knuckles you can see the fingernails and all of this, and it's just this weird contrast there. But I was like, oh, this guy is a guy who knows how to draw hands, and I want to be like this guy. So for a long period of time, what I was mostly concerned about was getting a good likeness in the face of whatever I drew. So like if I was drawing Bugs Bunny, I wanted it to look like Bugs Bunny, but I wasn't really paying attention to hands. And this is the first guy that really made me look at hands and say, okay, this is something I need to spend some time on. So this is one of my comics from The Lantern. And there's a little bit of a backstory to this in that I was at a homecoming parade a long time ago, probably when I was like 10 or 11, and I happened to pick up a copy of The Lantern, and what was in that was Jeff Smith's Thorn at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, you can do this in college? Like, this is great. I thought you had to go through King Features or whatever. And so that just kind of probably stuck in the back of my mind. And so I came to Ohio State and drew a comic there for 2.5 years. I think Jeff would share my feeling that when you look at, I just don't like these. They're just not very good. But you'll notice that I'm copying a lot of what Uderzo was doing in his drawings, adding the really, the knuckles and the fingernails and all of that, just in this really kind of weird, grotesque way. Like I'm looking at these and I'm like, these don't even really look like people. But anyway, I was just getting started off. So this is some of my work. This is a comic adaptation of Macbeth that I did, I'm gonna say about 10 years ago. And you'll still see that Uderzo influence there with the fingernails and the knuckles and things. I probably grabbed a few of these just right out of one of those books too, but there's a lot of that influence there as how I draw hands. And this is currently how I draw hands now. This is from my forthcoming book, the blue one on the table. We'll get into this one a little bit more and kind of go through this comic, well, just in a little bit, okay? So here's how some ways that I found to simplify hands. The first technique is to eliminate a finger, and this is an old animator's trick. They did not want to have to draw more fingers than they had to, and so they would just take a finger out. So you can see this is from Preston Blair's book, which is a really good book that everybody should own if they're interested in drawing comics and cartoons. He's actually an animator, but there's a lot of good stuff in there about walk cycles and things like that I really applied a lot of it to my own drawings. So this is one of the things that you can do. And you'll notice here Carl Barks on the left with the ducks. He has 3 fingers there. He came out of animation too, so that's probably where he picked it up. And then Richie Rich on the right side, and I'm guessing this is how he posts, but I'm not completely sure. He also has just 3 fingers on each hand as well. So these are people that are using that technique. And this is one from Bianca Zunis, who's going to be here this week. I just recently read her Punk Rock Karaoke, and she too is only using 3 fingers on her hand, and that just makes it a lot easier to draw. The one thing that's kind of an issue though is like it's really easy to do 3 fingers on things that were never human in the first place. So when you're drawing ducks, I mean, ducks don't have hands, so who knows if they have 3 fingers or 4 fingers or whatever. So a lot of times when we're drawing humans, even like the simplest characters, I was kind of surprised when I did a little research that they have 4 fingers on their hands. So you can see Linus there, Sluggo, and Little Lulu. All of them are using 3 fingers on their, or five fingers on their hands because kind of one of the things I would say is the more realistic it gets, the weirder it seems like to just have like 3 fingers. If you could imagine like Spider-Man or Superman or something like that, only having 3 fingers, I mean, they would look like aliens. So, well, Superman is an alien, but you know what I mean. So what I have developed here is what I call finger bundling. This is not trademarked, but and I may not be the first person to come up with this term, but if it is, you'll have to, hopefully I can, make some money off of this or something. Okay, so what you'll notice here is, I'm going to start over here. What I have done here is I've taken 4 fingers and I have bundled the middle 2, so it makes it a 3rd finger. Okay, so I'm not actually really drawing 4 fingers, I'm drawing 3, okay? So you'll see that there, and that's a technique that I use quite a bit. You'll see it down here below as well. I've bundled these 2 fingers together so that I'm really dealing with, 3 fingers technically. and doing that. Now, the other thing you'll see here is another finger bundling technique, which is to treat the 4 fingers as one thing by putting them all together. And then you're just drawing kind of like a mitten, really. So this is a technique that I use quite a bit. I've got an example here of where I am finger bundling right here, the 2 middle fingers, and treating them as one. And I'm also taking this and bundling these fingers together and making a mitten shape. Okay, so if you can kind of think about a hand as almost like a form where you are not drawing individual fingers but drawing shapes, that's one of the ways that you can simplify your hand drawing. And then you'll also see in this the underlying, just to go back to the previous slide, the underlying structure. I'm using the, even though these are relatively cartoony hands, I'm still using the 2 little bulges that you have on your hand and making sure that the proportions of the fingers and things are following what is the basic anatomy of the hand. Okay, so another technique is to eliminate a knuckle. So we have 3 joints on our fingers, and you can just take one out. So this is something that Uderzo does. If you notice, he's got these really realistic hands, as I said before. But if you look closely, each finger only has 2 knuckles. And he does this all, like I rarely see a 3-knuckle finger from him. But you don't really notice it. You're like, okay, they don't look weird. But that's one way that you can simplify things, is just to remove a joint here. And you'll notice that I have done this here. I've turned my fingers into 2 joint fingers here. And then even down here, you'll notice that even though these are not really really detailed hands, they kind of follow this like 1 knuckle structure here. So that's one way that you can eliminate a little bit of the detail from the fingers. So the other thing I have seen, we'll see a Simonson panel here in just a little bit. You'll notice he does that. And is anybody familiar with Bitterroot? That's a comic that I would recommend. And I noticed that when I was looking at it just the other day. I was like, oh, I'll be darned. He likes to draw, instead of doing 3 joints, he does 2 as well. Some other possibilities are you can just ignore every rule like Virgil Parch and just add as many fingers as you want. So that's another strategy, is like then you don't have to worry about anything at all. Another thing is if you just really want to simplify your hand drawing, you can always just cut one off, and then you only have to draw one. See, you can draw this. He didn't draw any hands at all. So that's another strategy that you can use if other shortcuts that you can do to simplify matters as well. Okay. All right. So let's look at practice drawing from reference. Now, the nice thing is if you go to Pinterest, you will find all sorts of pictures just like this of hands in various positions. And that's important. Like I said, we tend to see hands just from our perspective, but it's really difficult to imagine it sometimes when you're looking at somebody from the front or something like that. So there's a lot of references out there that you can use to draw certain things. Sometimes I take pictures of my hands, but a lot of times I just find it's easier to go on to look for a reference of a hand and do that instead. This is some hand references that I found that apparently are from Sword in the Stone by Disney. I don't know what they are really, because they don't really look like they're from, they don't look like sketches. They don't look like anything I've seen from Walt Disney before, so I'm not really sure exactly who compiled those and put them together. But you'll notice actually now that I look at this that they're using, well, actually it's interesting. So right here they're doing like 2 knuckles. But here there's 3. So there's a little bit of inconsistency in terms of how this looks. But like I said, I'm not completely sure this is like an official Disney thing. But it sure kind of looks like it. It's from the Sword in the Stone for sure. Do not use AI generated images to learn about hands, because this is what you'll get. So actually this looks like, if you brought one of those Virgil Parch characters to life, this is probably what they would look like. So, okay, so I just grabbed a hand from online. This is not my hand, it's somebody else's. And I thought this is kind of an interesting one to work with. So I was like, oh, this is kind of a fun shape. So let's do this. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through like how I would use a hand reference. So you'll notice here, I'll look here and you'll see that there's that square which has now been turned into a parallelogram. And you'll notice that we have the curve of the fingers, and the curve of the fingers is really important to understand with these in order to get these hands right. You have to be able to kind of think, okay, this is a much bigger curve than what we normally would see. You'll notice that naturally the fingers are bundled right here, so that's pretty easy. I can just kind of draw these two as one big bundle. And then you'll also notice here's that fleshy pad there where the thumb is, so I'm going to want to make sure I draw that in there. Okay, so this is my first little rough sketch. I just do kind of the basic palm here, and then I'll draw where the fingers go and the thumb goes, and then that little fleshy pad, I included that in there too. So you'll notice it's not quite right, but this is just kind of a sketch to see where everything goes. Okay, so this is my first pass at this hand, and it's not like an exact likeness, but it's kind of the same shape. And so this is the first drawing that I did. Now I noticed that this hand is way too long. So I've misjudged the proportions here. It doesn't look that bad. I mean, I could probably use it in certain circumstances, but this is just not how I draw. So what I did was I shortened it using Procreate and my little tools that are in there, shortened it up a little bit before I moved on to the ink stage. And that is what I ended up with, is a close approximation of that hand, okay? And this is definitely a thing where I feel like to get good at hands, you need to put in a lot of hours just practicing hands all the time. Okay, so let's talk about how we can add hands to gestures. And I remember watching the Olympics a couple months ago, and one of the things that they were talking about was people like Simone Biles on the beam and how their hands are like the ends of that expression. And you'll look at these hands and it's like, they're just very interesting. They're very flowing. They kind of follow the line of action, if you know what I'm talking about with that. And just how it becomes part of the gesture of the pose. It just won't look the same if it's not there. So one of the things that you can do is study what people do with their hands in conversation. And this is a few stills from a movie that I watched, I don't know, like a month ago. And it's called Mikey and Nicky. It's directed by Elaine May and has John Cassavetes and Peter Falk in it. Now you'll notice Peter Falk in there. And this is just a scene where a couple people are just talking. And he's using his hands to make some kind of interesting gestures here. The camera's on him for a very long time. But you'll see, you don't even really know exactly what he's talking about, but he's using his hands a lot. And one of the things that I've found is that I have in my work a lot of people that are just in conversation with one another and not really doing anything. And I need to find ways to kind of liven that up a little bit. And so adding some gestures to that is one of the ways that I found to not only add some excitement to it and some variety to it, but also some humor. Here's a good example. So this is Avi Steinberg, and this is something that I saw, I think I got this off Instagram, and you'll notice that even these are very, very simply drawn characters, but he is using gestures to help emphasize the dialogue, to create some excitement in the panels, and so it just becomes a much more expressive comic. Is it funnier? I don't know, maybe not. But at the same time, it just adds a little bit more variety to that and makes it more interesting to look at. So here we are back at Uderzo, and you'll notice here, even in this simple panel, we've got a lot going on. None of the characters are standing the same way. They're each doing something different. They're very over-exaggerated, which I like. And they are, this is a guy who just kind of knew how to do this. And I spent a lot of time studying his work as well, and just looking at like the line of action and how the hands were part of that gesture. And not only that, but like what the characters were saying and how the hands reflected that. So here's some other ones as well. So this is from John Byrne, Fantastic Four. And you'll notice that each character has hands that are doing something different that adds a little bit of variety to the pose. They're posed differently, but you'll also notice that each character is doing something a little bit different. And John Byrne pays a lot of attention to hands. And he was a guy that I really did like when I was growing up because of, I don't know, for some reason, his style was like comics to me. It made sense that this is how comics should be drawn. Walt Simonson, I was a big fan of The Mighty Thor. Just loved his run on that. And you'll notice too, if you look at Thor's outstretched hand here, I just noticed, I'd never noticed this when I was looking at it, but in this particular drawing, you'll notice that Simonson has actually eliminated a knuckle too. So we've got kind of like a two jointed finger here, but it doesn't look weird. So, not that Simonson is like the most realistic drawer that's out there doing comics, but he still found a way to kind of make that work in his work. Jack Davis is another guy who just knows how to add hands and use them as part of the expression. You'll notice that there's not like no hands are the same in this sequence of this Elvis character. It's also like not only do we have interesting gestures, but we also have hands at the end of these gestures that are really interesting to look at as well. And then, of course, Wally Wood, we'll back to him. Another guy that just has really great expressions. I just love this panel here where he's got his hand up against his face thinking, and he's pointing as well. Just this has always cracked me up, is that he punches Captain Marbles and then it just kind of shrinks in. But yeah, he's got just really expressive stuff. I love the yawn here as a response to, oh yeah, you're boring me trying to beat me up. And all that. So that's what I wanted to say about that one. And then another guy that was like my guy was Aragones, and I first encountered his work in Mad Magazine, of course, as well. Most of his comics are wordless, if you don't know. And I found myself, because of the gestures and the way that he does that, like actually imagining dialogue in my head of what people were saying. And it's just kind of crazy. It's a testament to his skill that he was able to do that. And then finally, this is a person that I did not grow up with, but I think that Darwin Cook draws really interesting hands as well. I recommend his series, The Hunter, because there's just a lot of really good drawing in it, a lot of good storytelling, and his hands are just really cool. They're just kind of like blocky a little bit, I guess. Very expressive too. And just have always enjoyed looking at the hands that he draws. And then and this is another recent one, but if I had to say study like one guy that would be in your list of people that you should study for hands and gestures, it's Max Sarin and his work on Giant Days, which I absolutely loved. And he it has a knack for expressions, doing cool stuff with hands, just a lot of stuff that, he's just got a lot going on in his books, and just a great, terrific artist. So Giant Days is the name of that one. Anybody familiar with Max? Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, so his books are just great. They're phenomenal. Okay, so this is a panel. I'll show you how, I'll just kind of walk you through this, and you'll see the gestures that I'm using here for these particular characters. So this is a comic that I did for the educational market, which is designed to teach similes and metaphors, okay? So if this was a classroom setting, I would ask people to read the dialogue, and it would be kind of fun and interactive, but because of the recording of the presentation, I won't do that. But here's the first panel. I'm writing a love letter to Kit, but I'm having trouble expressing my feelings. Why not try a simile or a metaphor? Okay, how about, you are like my nose, I picked you. Ew, gross. Start with, you are like a rose. Because I'm allergic to you? No. You'll die without water? Let's try a metaphor. Let's see. Your lips are two fat worms on your face. Oh dear. Your eyebrows are two caterpillars napping together. No one wants to be compared to a bug or have their eyebrows complimented. I've got it. Listen. There is a garden in thy face where roses and white lilies grow. A heavenly paradise is that place wherein all pleasant fruits do flow. Hey, what did I say? Now that's a metaphor. Okay, so you can see a lot of these expressions here. If you go through, I'm always trying to have characters do something with their hands, and that reflects the dialogue that's purposeful. So you can see a lot of the stuff that I've done there to make this a little bit more expressive, a little bit more fun, add a little bit more humor to it. Here's another one. This is about illusions. Hey, what's wrong? Look at this card that Tom left in my locker. And the card says, a winged youth has flown into my life and pierced my heart with his arrow. Oh no, someone shot him with an arrow. Do you think he's dead? Who is the winged youth? People can't fly. Maybe these are his last words. How will I find a prom date now? It's an allusion to Cupid, the god of love. A boy with wings and a bow and arrow? I don't know what he's talking about. Whatever happened to romance? Okay, so that was to use to teach illusions. Again, lots of expressions. I'm always trying to make characters do something, and most of the time I'm trying to make it funnier or more lighthearted. Okay, so I wanted to talk about how I turn a script into a comics page with gestures, because I tend to do the script first and do the dialogue first, and then kind of figure out how that's going to work. And so I wanted to give you an example of how I did this by showing you a script and then showing you what it looks like in the comics page. So as you're looking at this, imagine what you would do to turn this into a page. What are the moves that you would make, okay? So this one is about Eli Metchnikoff, and he is the person that discovered that there's bacteria in yogurt. So the heading is sometime in the early 1900s. Russian guy. What are you looking at, Dr. M? Metchnikoff. Bacteria from my intestines. Russian guy. Sounds, ugh, fascinating. Metchnikoff. I have discovered something of great importance. See? Good bacteria, not bad stuff. Yeah? So what? This good bacteria comes from the yogurt I ate this morning. All this squirmy stuff can only mean one thing. Yogurt is alive. The microbes from the yogurt kill the bad bacteria. My gut is having a party. I theorize if you have enough good bacteria in your body, you can stop growing old. Disclaimer at the bottom, not true. Wow, and maybe live forever. Soon, thanks to Dr. M, yogurt was in high demand. There's a random group of Russians. Wow, Dr. M was right. I feel like I haven't aged a day. I feel like 1,000,000 rubles, all thanks to yogurt. Okay, so here's the final comic in the early 1900s. What are you looking at, Dr. M? Bacteria from my intestines. Sounds, ugh, fascinating. I'm looking at something of great importance. See? Good bacteria, not bad stuff. Yeah, so what? The good bacteria came from the yogurt I ate this morning. All this squirmy stuff can only mean one thing. There should be quotation marks around that. It's my error. Yogurt is alive. The microbes from the yogurt kill the bad bacteria. My gut is having a party. I theorize that if you have enough good bacteria in your body, you can stop growing old. Wow, and maybe live forever. Soon, thanks to Dr. M, yogurt was in high demand. Wow, Dr. M was right. I feel like I haven't aged a day. I feel like 1,000,000 francs, all thanks to yogurt. Okay, so here's another one that I'm going to show you. That last one was from Pizza, Pickles, and Apple Pie. This is from my new book. And this book, the new book is on medicine, and I wanted to have some comics that introduced each chapter. And so here's the first one. So actually, I think I'll skip these and we'll just kind of read the comic and you can see how I use gestures to do it. Hey, where's Eric? He's in the hospital. He had to have his appendix out. Whoa. What's your appendix do anyway? No idea. I had to go to the hospital when I broke my arm falling off the monkey bars. I had pneumonia when I was 2. I was in the hospital for a couple of days. I swallowed a battery when I was 4. I had a really bad toe infection. Want to see a picture? Ew, I'm good. I bet they had to put him under. He won't remember anything about the surgery. Do you think he'll remember I owe him $20? Who would forget that? I hope he's not in too much pain afterward. Speaking of pain, Plunkett's math test gave me a migraine. Hey, I just got a message from Eric. He's doing great. Ask him if he gets to take his appendix home in a jar. Okay, that's the end of that comic. And I have to mention, I was a huge Archie Comics fan. Like, Archie Comics have influenced a lot of my work. I don't know if you noticed the influence in terms of like the comics that you've seen thus far, but just the kind of the dialogue, making everything kind of funny and doing things like that. And I wanted to make sure that everybody, at the end of the book, we get to hear from Eric. Eric comes back to school, so I want to make sure you got that, just because I didn't want you to worry about what happened to Eric. Again, pay attention to the gestures and having people do something. Like I put this in the lunchroom so that they had something to do with their hands. Hey, Eric, you're back. Yep, just with a part missing. How was the surgery? Not bad. I went home the next day. And guess what? They let me keep my appendix. Want to see it? Oh boy, you bet. Okay, it'll cost you $1. What a ripoff. There goes my lunch money. Okay, hold on. Whoa, gross. Wait a minute. That looks like a hot dog you dropped in water. He's right. Have you ever seen an appendix? No. Well, how do you know this isn't one? He has a point. I'm going to prove it's fake. I'll eat it. I'll get a bun from the cafeteria. Don't forget the ketchup. See, I told you so. Do you have any organs I can eat? Okay, and that's the end. That's the end of the book. So, okay, so to finish up, here's some hands that I use all the time. So if you kind of want to get down hands and kind of get the hands that you're going to use a lot, I just went back through my work and I kind of looked at the hands that that I tended to draw a lot and grouped them into categories and kind of put them into categories so you could see what I was doing. Okay, so the first one is fists. I will admit I'm not the best at drawing fists. I got a lot of work to do with that, but you'll notice a lot of fists here in the drawings that I did. If you move a few fingers, you can get some interesting poses that way with fists too. So this is a good one to get down. Some of these are kind of funny out of context. Okay, pointing. You'll notice that you can do just a traditional point like this, like when you're pointing at something, but there's a lot of other things that you can do, like twirl your fingers around. So pointing is another good one. One of the things you have to master with this is making sure the index finger is positioned right so it doesn't look like your characters are flicking somebody off, and that's really hard to do. But if you have Procreate or whatever, you can just move this finger around until it looks right and not offensive. Okay, the open palm is one I use quite a bit too, whether it's from the outside or the inside. You'll notice that I use that quite a bit. So another good one that's really pretty easy to draw once you get it down and can be applied to a variety of situations. Spread fingers is another one that I use for excitement, for shock, just holding hands in particular positions. That one's really funny out of context, but so spread hands right there. So that's another good one that you can work on with that. And the finger bundling, of course, comes into this one quite a bit as well. But if it's kind of like a panel like this where a guy's dizzy, I tend to not really draw them all that accurately or with that much detail. I couldn't think of what to call this, but I just called it the claw, and it's just a hand that's kind of like spread out, like clutching a little bit. So you can use it to have people manipulate things, kind of showing like disgust. You can just have it holding there when you're getting, a shot or things like that. The pinch is what I call this one. I tend to have characters using this either like a 1 or 2 finger like holding expression, and so you can see that a lot of these these are hand gestures that I use quite a bit. Writing is one that I use surprisingly a lot, and it's also something that you can use if you're having characters do acupuncture or infecting mice with anthrax or anything like that. But it's a pretty versatile hand, and it's kind of hard to draw. So it's not a bad one to get down and practice, because you just really have to understand like how you hold a pencil and like look at the way that you hold a pencil and how your one finger goes up and then the other 3 fingers go underneath. And then holding, you're just going to have to think of holding different objects. And one of the things I would suggest to you is to think about, okay, they're not holding a book, they're holding a box. Like they're holding a cereal box, or they're holding a box, and think about, okay, this is just a rectangle. There is, let's see, a tray is somebody holding like a tray or something like that. I do that a lot, or holding like a bowl of yogurt in this case, and just developing those hand shapes so that when they can hold things. And you don't really need a whole lot. Most of the time you can just kind of fake it and work around it. I also like the thinking hands. So having some hands that are used to kind of put up around people's faces, doing things like that. I'm not really sure people actually do this, but I do think that it's like a comic convention that this is what people do when they think. The one that I don't have up here that I have used is the one where people kind of scratch their heads or have their hands off to the side. I don't have any examples of that, but that's another thinking pose that I use quite a bit. And then once you get good at these, you can draw these like multi-paneled drawings. This is from my new book, which comes out in November, where you have people holding things, you have people resting their hands on things, you have people holding a scalpel, people holding the ether, and just holding their hands by their side. And then here's another example of one that I did. This is Robert Liston, and tried to include a bit of humor here and say, "Time me, gentlemen," which he actually did. He was known as the fastest amputator in the West End. And he, so then I added the left leg, the left. So this is all, so he'd go into the theaters and do this. I think he could amputate a leg in 90 seconds or something like that. I forget. He was a really quick guy at that. Okay, so now's the question time, and I'm just going to leave this up here. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, there's my Instagram. I don't know if you know about Substack, but Substack, I just recently, within the past couple months, got hooked on because there's just a ton of artists there. There's a ton of people writing about their artwork and how they do it. And I've tried to do that. So everything that's in this presentation is on Substack. I'm also doing daily Substacks this week as I'm at CXC to just kind of like say, this is what I did, this is what I saw. And of course, you can go to my website and check out my work there. You can get copies of the book there and all of that. Okay, so questions? Yes?
At the beginning, you said that you didn't study cartooning or anything arts related in college.
Yeah.
Did that hinder your creative career, or like how did that impact?
What was the last part of the question?
Like, do you feel like that hindered your creative career, or how did that impact?
Oh, just not going to art school?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, I did not go to art school, and did that hinder my career as a cartoonist? The first thing I want to say is I had a really good arts foundation from being in middle school and high school, where I learned a lot of the fundamentals, like light and shadow, color, basic shapes, how to break things down and do things like that. And so those were really important classes for me to take, and I'm grateful to particularly my middle school art teacher for giving me the foundation that I needed. I did an awful lot of studying on my own. I would buy books, like, when I grew up, there was not the internet. So, somebody would tell me to buy like Bern Hogarth's books, and that would teach me anatomy. My uncle gave me a cartooning book that I could learn from and things like that. So it was more, I think I was always just so curious that I was soaking in lessons from everything that I looked at. And I don't want to say that like cartooning doesn't require like the in-depth study of things, but you just I think really you just have to learn how to see. That's what I've always told people. It's not about drawing, it's about learning how to see what things look like. So if you take something like a car and you break that down to its basic shapes, it makes it a lot easier to draw that because it's essentially a big box, and then you just kind of round the edges up. That's how I still draw cars to this day, is I draw the box and then fill it in. So I don't know for sure because I never went to art school, but so I don't really know anything about that. But I do feel like I'm not real good at drawing like buildings and like scenery. That's kind of my weakness. So maybe I'd be a little bit better at that stuff. Yes?
Are there any pitfalls or things that you had to like learn not to do, or things that you see in other people's hands that drive you up the wall?
I think most people, so I was looking for bad hands and I couldn't really find any. I do know that a lot of people like hide them sometimes behind things so that they don't have to draw them. In terms of pitfalls, I think the biggest one is drawing fingers too long. That seems to be the thing that I do quite a bit. Or sometimes I'll draw like the thumb too long, but I can usually see those and adjust them. And it's kind of interesting because what I'm drawing is relatively cartoony stuff, and you think it wouldn't matter. But even when you draw cartoony, it seems weird. It doesn't seem like it fits in with what you're doing. So yeah, that's what I would say. Yes?
Kind of a silly question. We did all those hand exercises.
Yeah.
And you're choosing to eliminate your finger by doing the two in the middle.
Yeah.
Who in the room can do that? Because I've been sitting here this whole time
Oh.
trying to put the two middle fingers together. So
Yeah.
It's like the hardest
Yeah.
to do. Every
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about that is like, if you look at a lot of the hand gestures that I use, they are not gestures that most people use. they're just meant to express things. And, you know, like I don't talk with my hands out like this, but I use that expression a lot in conversation. So there's a certain amount of like, yeah, maybe we can't do that with our hands, but it still works. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. So other questions about it? It can be about anything. It doesn't have to be just hands and things like that. Recipes, I got some recipes. Yes, go ahead.
Well, you're a teacher. What do you teach?
I teach high school English. Everybody thinks I'm an art teacher, which is actually kind of interesting that you didn't think that I was, you know, so, but that's what they always assume. So yeah, I will say that a lot of like, my work is like inspired or helped a lot by spending a lot of time with adolescents because it's just really easy to capture the dialogue that they say. And it's also easy for me to do this stuff because I am kind of immersed in that world of kids and just, you know, how they are and how they act and all of that. So, yeah.
I understand it. Retired elementary school.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Yeah. So there's a really good audience. Like I love to present to them because they're just fun. They just get into stuff. Plus, I'm not math, so I think that helps. You know, it's like, yeah. So, yeah. And then there was one time I was in there talking to this group of teachers, and I had like an hour allotted at like 1 o'clock, and I asked the teachers like, "How do you have any more time for questions?" They were like, "Oh, you can take all the time that you want." You know, they were willing to give me the rest of the 2 hours, the rest of the day, so they didn't have to deal with them after recess. So, yeah. So, any other questions? Okay, well, thanks for everything. Thanks for listening. You can feel free to look at my 2 books up here if you'd like to. I'll be tabling at CXC on Saturday and Sunday, so I cannot sell the blue book. You can pre-order that one, but Pizza, Pickles, and Apple Pie I'll have for sale on those days. What?
I have 6 of those.
Oh, you have 6 of those?
Yeah.
Okay. You can see my dad. He can sell you books. Yeah. I don't have anything to like, oh wait, I could probably use one of these. Hey, look, they have markers here for just an occasion. So, yeah. Yeah, so they are signed? Okay. Well, then I don't have to do anything. But yeah, but if you want me to personalize it, I can, you know, personalize it. So, yeah, that's the real reason why he's here. So, it's to sell books. All right, okay. Well, hang around for Jeff Smith. Oh, you have a question? Yes. I never watched it. Yeah, I never watched it. I just was I was more into the Sam Schwartz, Dan DiCarlo, that stuff from like the 50s and 60s. But that was what was available to me. Like I didn't really buy any more. It was just a big collection of comics. They might have been yours. I don't know. Somebody read Archie, and so I had them there. So yeah, okay, all right.